Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Crime Centric. This being a show where we talk about crime dramas that I watch. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Good Girls. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Literally picking up where last week's episode left off, you get the great confrontation between Rio and Beth. Beth can't even say anything. Rio's just talking the entire time. It's like, oh, so how you been? Talking about her son and everything, and it's just like, oh, things are super awkward. And then he starts lining up the bullets. It's like, oh yeah, lung, spleen, shoulder. And it's like, okay, so those are all the bullets that hit her. And it's just like, oh boy, that sucks. And before Beth can really get up, he's like, no, let's do this. He's like, I'm not going to let anyone else do it. I'm going to take care of it first. And it's like, come on, let's end this. And she says, I'm pregnant. And he pauses. I was like, whoa, my mind, I'm going to go ahead. It took me a while to catch up because initially, I'll tell you what I thought. I thought like, oh, she actually got pregnant by him. To be fair, the timeline wouldn't necessarily work out, but I guess it could be a thing of like maybe she didn't realize it until more recently. But then I start thinking like obviously her and Dean having sex over and over again. At first I was like, oh my god, are you trying to cover it up to make Dean think like, oh, it's his baby while this is actually Rio's baby? That's what I was thinking. And it took me a while before I clicked in my head of like, no, you're not pregnant at all. You're just trying to pretend to be pregnant so that he won't kill you. It took a while for that to click in my head. So that was interesting. I was like, oh, okay. Especially Dean too, because Dean's kind of thinking it's awesome and everything. He's like, I don't know where this kind of came from. I mean, he's like, no, I'm not trying to argue about it. It's like, we kind of, but for him, he felt good about even saying like, it's like, hey, Beth, I love you and everything. Because for him, he even talks about it later on, but it made him feel like maybe they were in a good place again. But it's kind of sad, like she's, taking pregnancy test after pregnancy test. Then other things are already spiraling and kind of going a little wrong because, hey, it turns out the guy they got to clean their money for him apparently got arrested, and apparently there's a video out of like him getting, because it was about sauce or whatever, and he started flipping out about it, and then Beth's like, what are you talking about? It's like, yeah, we're talking about this dude, and it's just like everything just kind of went wrong. Interestingly enough, Annie, she's still singing Josh and everything, and he's bringing up the fact is that because obviously Annie's talking about Beth and stuff like that, kind of like doing a lot of stuff to Beth, but it's because Beth has always kind of been very bossy and stuff like that. But then like you had Josh kind of throwing out a perspective of what if it's just because Beth only kind of goes as far as she does because you are the way you are. So it's like if you stop acting, maybe if you started acting more like an adult, maybe things would kind of shift between you and Beth. And I thought that was kind of interesting. That ends up progressing in a very interesting lane later on because now because Beth is stressing out because it's like, holy crap, like I got to deal with this whole Rio situation. Interestingly enough, not interestingly enough, it had to be done on purpose, but she runs into Rio's baby mama, and it's like, she's like, and I love that thing of like, I don't know how much you know, but you know enough to hate my guts. And eventually kids keep coming up, and she's just like, I'm not pregnant. And the woman looks at her, and I guess it's just kind of like, I doubt that was the least of the things. I'm sure it was more so. I'm sure Rio probably keeps it up front because she probably, like, it's a thing of, like, she knows what Rio's mixed up in, what world he's a part of, but she knows not to talk about it. So, like, why would she bring it up to Beth? Because she didn't even know Beth knew Rio like that. But it's not even that thing. It's just a thing of like, oh, you were just using me. Because even Beth's like, I get it. It's weird. It's messed up. But I just thought, I wanted to make sure you guys were okay because of everything. And it's like, but I'm not pregnant. And the fact of the matter is saying like, he will kill me and stuff like that. But she doesn't really say anything and just kind of leaves. And, and Beth kind of thought that was the end of it. Because the sad thing is, Beth actually enjoyed her company and everything. It's like, oh, yeah, this is my friend. I was curious to see if Rio was going to say anything, especially considering the fact is, it did seem like she set Beth up because it's like, oh, she's not coming. I thought Rio was like, no, you just stay in tonight. Can I go? Like, I thought Rio arranged something like so he could be the one to just kind of be out and about, not necessarily the one that meets Beth. But now in retrospect, it's like, oh, yeah, she definitely set him up. I don't think it really crossed my mind to think about that last episode, but nevertheless. So while that's kind of already being kind of an issue, there's the Stan and Ruby situation. Anytime they talk about Ruby's situation, their safe word is egg roll. And it's like, what? She's like, I'm just talking about egg rolls. And he's like, Stan just keeps saying that over and over again. So just because he doesn't want to, think about like, he wants to have plausible deniability because obviously knowing too much kind of got him screwed over in the previous situation. So I was like, I'm not trying to go down that lane again. So And then there's the whole situation with Dean, which I forgot to bring that up last episode. But the moment like he went out with his boss and she grabbed onto his finger like that, I was like, oh, it's about to turn into that, which is like, oh, we already know how Dean handles that whole, workplace romances thing. Well, workplace affairs. So we kind of already knew that. I was like, but I completely forgot to talk about that. But now it's like, oh, he's, it's like, oh, he's talking about like, taking what he knew from the dealership and applying it to his new job. And she's like, oh, dude, you want to go to dinner with me? And she's like, oh, yeah, sure. We can talk about logistics and all this and that. She's like, whatever you need to tell your wife. And it's like, yep. She's not even hiding in the front. She's like, oh, yeah, yeah. Whatever you need to tell your wife to make her okay, and kind of walks away. And I'm like, oh, that's going to get messy. So, which at the same time, there's a whole situation where Dean is like dyeing his hair because there is a part of him that is kind of going for it. But then like he looks in the trash and sees the pregnancy test that Beth kind of threw away. And it's like, wait, you were trying to get pregnant? For him, it's a thing of like, wait. So now at first, because it's a multitude of things. It's like, for one, you're trying to have a baby without consulting me about it. It's like we have 4 kids, we can't even afford like having another kid on top of that. But also, she's like, oh, so it's a problem for the kind of like, because for him, he feels like, oh, you're just using me as a sperm bank, and then it's kind of like, is that all I'm good for or something? And then like I forgot how it was exactly, but the conversation came up about his cheating again. And she's like, oh, like you would know about that and stuff like that. He's like, I thought we were in a good place. But for him, it's just kind of like, it's like, and then Beth, it's just kind of looking at him. It's like, did you dye your hair or something? And he's just kind of like, I don't want another kid. I might be kind of the asshole in this situation, but I just don't want another kid. And Beth feels guilty because for her, it's like, because she's hiding the fact of what's really going on. Because it's just like, and it's just because now she's making Dean feels like that. And she feels kind of bad about, I am just kind of using you to get myself knocked up so that I can live. Because it's not just her life on the line. Rio's not just going to stop with her. He's going to kill her entire family. He's going to kill Dean. He's going to kill her kids. So it's just like she's scared, so it's understandable. Before all this, there was meeting up with Home Dude that they work with. And I love the fact is that Annie kind of brings up the whole thing of like, who's actually the one in charge here? It's like, what are you talking about? It's like, well, job positions and stuff like that. Who's HR? Who's this? Who's that? And, Beth is like, aren't we equal partners in all of this? I think is what, it was Beth and Ruby were suggesting that, but Annie's like, are we? Like, are we really that even? And I even love that whole conversation about, like, I got to keep this just in case I ever get locked inside a trunk. That's going to come back in some shape or form. Annie, at some point in the season, is going to get locked up in a trunk and is going to be like, see, it's a good thing I had this. Or she's going to use it and it's going to break or be completely useless. I just feel like they're foreshadowing that. But she's like, but they're going to take my hot Cheetos. And then it's like, yeah, and that woman, Ruby was like, yeah, that woman kind of gave me, you're not the one, you didn't have to get, examined like that. And I love Annie being like, yeah, I think she liked it a little too much. And Ruby's like, I think she really liked it too much. So a cavity search was the whole situation. So but now it's a situation of like, well, they've got to get Home Dude's vehicle, and because he's like, yeah, all the money is in my vehicle and in my van. And it's like, all right, so how are we going to get it? And then Beth and Annie turn to Ruby, and Ruby's like, nah, don't even look this way. And she's like, you can keep looking. And it's not going, but then like she's trying to butter up Stan later on, but like, oh yeah, so-and-so was it Mike or Sonny or whatever, like asked about it. It was like, what? It's like, yeah, I missed you. It's like, really? Why? The fact of the matter is we're on a softball team and like never say, he's like, oh yeah, just like, oh, she's just trying to butter him up and drinking and stuff like, it's just like, all right, we need a van. And he was like, really? The fact of the matter is, it's like, what's this about? She's like, egg rolls. And she says something else, and then he says something else, and she's like, egg rolls, because you wanted that plausible deniability. But it was interesting because it wasn't until he was at work the next day that kind of made him change his mind, because the stripper that he's kind of like the most friendly with, it seems like basically she lies to her mom, because it's like, well, I tell her this lie because honestly, like, if she knew where I was really getting the money, she wouldn't accept it. But the fact of the matter is, I'm taking care of her in whatever way I can. And I think for Stan, he can appreciate like lying and stuff like that as a means to kind of protect the people that you care about, and kind of going down, certain lanes you might not be too happy about, So, like, he recognizes, like, everything that she's doing, like Ruby is doing as a criminal and stuff like that. But at the same time, it is for the sake of their family. So, lying and kind of doing a little manipulating, it's okay in the long run. It's at least making it more acceptable. They make this whole point of, like, later on putting out a swear jar because their little boy is apparently dropping the F-bomb and asking people, do they want to see his coccyx and stuff like that. So, it's like, all right, suggesting a swear jar. And it's like, oh, how much money? She's got 40. I was like, is he about to? He's like, yeah, drop half half of that in there. She's like, wait, seriously? He's like, yeah. Like right now, it's like right now. And she's like, Stan, we're not bad people. He's like, no, honey, we're good people who do bad things. And taps her to kind of drop it. So kind of showing that, once again, I am surprised. When you actually think about where Stan was at the beginning of all this, to see him, like, he was so just kind of went along with it. He was even like, hey, once we're at the end of season 2 rolling around, it's like, oh, we're clear of all this. Hopefully it's A-okay. But it's like, no, now it's in this situation of like, the whole situation of, you know, he's very flexible and morally gray, you know, with certain aspects, because, you know, it's like, because, you know, Ruby could justify it, but we're not doing like terrible crimes. We're not like murderers. We're doing white collar crimes. So it's not as bad, which you could admit, you know, on the grand scheme of things, legally it's still a terrible thing. But I mean, there are worse crimes out there. So that's the whole twist with that whole situation. But I thought was kind of interesting is when it was all said and done, like they do get home dude out of, you know, jail and everything. And so when the time comes, it's like, all right, so what are we going to do? It's like, no, we're going to keep things on pause, which Annie was like, no, we're not, because she was getting upset because it's like, there you go again, Beth, making charge, like, leader. It's like, oh, you're the president or whatever of this whole situation. It's just like, I'm dealing with a lot. And Annie's like, blah, 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 blah. And then she drops the bomb. He's alive. Wait, what? And it's like, yeah, he's alive. It's like, how? She's like, I don't know, but he just is. Which, once again, the biggest middle finger. I said this last episode, I think. It's like, Turner left you the biggest middle finger. It's like, because he was so caught up in his own thing of trying to, you know, win big and shut down cases and stuff like that. He should have never let Rio live. He should have never underestimated Rio, you know? So that was the biggest problem. I'm curious to find out whether whether our hero, like, you know, the girls will ever find out, like, how Rio came to be. Because that would be interesting. They find out, wait, Turner? Man, he screwed. I want to hear that conversation. Be like, damn it, Turner? Like, him doing what he did kind of screwed us over. Which is, I'm about to say, it's actually kind of funny to say that. Just, well, because that's his last name, but that's actually my dad's first name. So it kind of messes with me a little. Actually, it's my dad and my grandfather's name. I mean, getting into tangent. Like, I never bring that up before, but it is kind of weird when I say, damn it, Turner, just because, like, it feels weird. Regardless, I went on a bit of a tangent there, so I do apologize. But, yeah, I thought that was, you know, just kind of, I'm curious to see. And now, you know, Annie kind of feels bad about it because it's like, I put all this pressure on you. I was kind of getting mad at you, but, oh, you've been dealing with that. And it's just kind of, and even Annie's like, dude, like, you could literally take the world's best sniper and tell them not to hit a major organ, and you're just going to accidentally do it anyway. It's like, once again, she got his spleen. What was it? She got his, what was it? His, something else, and a show, like, it's like, should have went for the headshot. You know, it's like wise words from Thanos himself. Should have gone for the head, you know? So it's that type of situation. Once again, you shouldn't have underestimated Turner. You shouldn't have left him to kind of do the good guy thing, which he kind of did the good guy thing too, because it was his whole thing of like getting a small fry to take care of bigger fry. But the sad thing is, Rio's a much bigger fish than you gave him credit for in the whole grand scheme of things. At least that's how I feel about it. And obviously, like, Beth is kind of getting drunk and stuff like that. They're like, we should go to the cops. She's like, yeah, and then we get arrested, and then I get, shivved, and in prison. And he's like, well, you most likely get shanked. And it's like, oh, what's the difference? Which I really appreciate that she brought up the difference. I never knew that was a difference. I thought it was more of an interchangeable thing, but it's like, depending on the weapon itself determines, like, what kind of it. If it's a shank is more like a metal piece or something. Like, it's something that naturally kind of already has like a sharp edge, but then something that's a shiv is more something that you fold and you make into a dark, sharper edge. Like if you did take a toothbrush and then like melted it a little bit to kind of give it more point to it, that's a shiv and everything. I was like, oh, I appreciate Annie. Interesting enough, it being Annie that gives us like the lowdown on, I mean, to be fair, none of them are, once again, hardcore criminals, but it's just interesting that Annie out of anybody would give them the lowdown on that. So it's just kind of like, you know, what do you, and she's like, can we, and you know, what was it that she said? I think she was saying basically, can we get fries delivered? And he's like, we could do whatever you want. And then, like, you know, Beth lays back down. You're kind of like, you feel bad about it. Because obviously even, like, Ruby later on when she got home, she made sure to lock the door. And Stan was like, you okay? And she just kind of, like, doesn't tell Stan, which is like, that's an issue. Obviously, Dean's in the dark, which, circling back to Dean actually tried to do the right thing. He's like, honestly, like, dinner, it would be great. I mean, it's not, I could actually do it, but I don't want to. Just because, you know, at my old job, I went to a lot of dinners. I had different meals a day type of situation. You know, using this all as a metaphor thing. I've been with a lot of women, but now I kind of want to make things work for my marriage. It's just like, no, I completely understand. He's like, oh, okay, good. I was working on that thing. She's like, yeah, you should work here. And it's like, oh. He's basically getting punished because he turned her down. And it's like, oh, you're not going to... Okay. And so she's demoting him to, like, work other... Like, he's like, well, you're making me demote me to tongs and stuff like that. She's like, is it a problem? He's like, no. And it's kind of like, I probably should have just went ahead and slept with you. It's like me trying to be honorable actually screwed me over. You know, it's like, it's ironic. It's like you should have been honorable before, and obviously cheating screwed you over. But this time being honorable screwed you over when cheating would have actually made it better. Which is, cheating would have never been a better thing, especially because he is trying to repair everything between him and Beth, because, you know, at the end of the day, he still loves Beth. He still always has. It's just been a very, very complicated thing. But for him, he kind of felt like they were bridging that gap. But despite the issues they're going through, the fact is he didn't take that step, I think, speaks volumes. Maybe the most recent set of events did put him in that mood to not go down that lane. Either way, so with all that happening, you know, Beth... I like that moment when she was coming home at night, and then, like, the music kind of tones down, and then she sees Rio kind of reaching his pocket. I was like, oh, but then she drops her keys, picks it up, looks again. It's someone walking their dog, and the music kind of gets back, and I was like, oh, I like how that was done. But Rio shows up later on. He's like, oh, we should go for a ride. She's like, oh, I got ice cream. He's like, get in the car, Elizabeth. And basically they go to a doctors to kind of get her checked out, and she's just obviously she's nervous as hell, and obviously it's the whole conversation like, oh, when do you think you got pregnant? And she's like, I kind of don't. He's like, come on, don't you remember? It's like, oh, when we were in that we were in your bed when your husband was away or something like that. And she's like, I put it on the phone. I was like, right. I was like, right, because I think in my head I kept thinking of the bathroom, but I was like, right, I forgot they did it on her bed. I completely forgot. I let that slip my mind until you brought it up. I was like, right, you've actually done it twice. And it's like, we'll just have to wait, you know, too soon for a heartbeat to really register and stuff like that. But when it's all said and done, it's like, oh, like, you know, oh, can, you know, in an MRI and stuff like that. Not MRI, but a sonogram. And she was like, oh, but what's the point? And he's like, no, it's never too soon. I'm like, oh shit. But then I was like, oh, maybe last second you did manage to get pregnant. But I was like, no, those pregnant tests came out negative. And she's like, oh, look, there's something. And it's like, I was like, how the hell is that? And then, like, Rio's like, he was looking, I was like, all right, and walks away, and he's like, but a paternity test, it's like, you'll have to wait a little while for that. But it turns out the doctor lady covered for him because of Rio's baby mom, and I'm like, dude. And even Beth is asking later on, it's like, you know, trying to talk to her, like, why did you do that? And she was like, you're a mom. And like, the fact of the matter is, it's like, she doesn't want none of Beth's kids, because it's like, you know, she spent enough time around Beth that she would feel this way anyway, but also because she gotten to know Beth, especially because she's gotten to know Beth's kids a little bit because they've spent time with her son, that it's kind of like she doesn't want Beth's kids to grow up without a mom. It's like, so there's that, but also he's not stupid. Like, he's eventually, that's the thing, like, this lie can only last so long before it ends up kind of blowing up in their faces. Another avenue to this whole thing is like Annie kind of going in there to talk to Josh, because for her it's like she kind of feels bad about the whole, you know, it's kind of like, you know, she kind of looks back on everything and kind of realizes like how much Beth was actually looking out for her and protecting her. I love that Josh is like, actually, I'm in the middle of another session. And a little girl walks out and goes to the bathroom and is like, yeah, she walked in on her parents making love. And Annie's like, ew. And he's like, I know, right? And she's like, no, the fact is that you said making love. But also, like, she kind of, you know, tells about the fact is that now she kind of recognizes, like, how much Beth looks out for her. But she feels bad about it because it's like, if Beth's doing all this for me, like, who's looking out for her? Like, and it's like, aha, so we made a breakthrough. And she's like, ew. He's like, what's wrong with that? It's like, it's just the way you said it, it's like, oh, but Annie is making progress. And the fact is that, it's kind of like the first step of kind of recognizing that she becomes more aware of the circumstances of like, oh yeah, your sister does so much to protect you and stuff like that. So now the question is like, kind of figuring out what you're going to do about it now that you've kind of figured that out. Now essentially now that you've recognized the issue, or the situation, you can kind of tackle it more accurately. So I thought that was kind of neat. So obviously she's spending time with Annie, trying to spend time with her kid, because I think kind of like taking a little bit of her own influence of kind of rubbing off, because obviously her kid's such a hard worker, and it's like, kind of slack off a little bit. Here's this cereal. Oh, it's a little stale and stuff. It's like, no, take the milk, add more milk, and it'll kind of soften it out. And it's like, where'd you kind of learn to like eat like this and take care of yourself like this? It's like, your Aunt Beth and everything. So I think it's just kind of like, I think, kind of recognizing, kind of obviously implementing her own parenting style, but also recognizing what, kind of Beth has kind of done for her, especially with these more recent circumstances, which at the very end we have Beth coming home, and then you have Dean standing there. I'm like, oh, I guess he's going to tell her. And then he's just staring out the window, and it's like, yeah, said his boss wanted to keep an eye on you. And it's like, oh, we're kind of back to this again, because Beth looks outside, and it's one of Rio's boys outside. And he's like, who's his boss, Beth? And she's like, I guess I got to tell you something. And it's like, all right, so drop this bomb on him and explain like what this has all been about. Probably also explaining the fact that might probably go through the trouble of probably explaining what you've been up to too, that you haven't 100% walked away from this criminal stuff. It's going to be interesting to see how much she tells her. I'm assuming she's going to end up telling him everything, but ultimately we'll kind of have to wait and see. I am very, very interested to see where all this ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. This whole situation, like how long this pregnancy lie can last, because it can't last forever, because eventually Rio's going to find out. But now that Dean's a part of it, is Dean going to knock her up to kind of, well, because let's not forget, Rio's going to ask for a paternity test anyway. So it's like, how do you skate around this? Because you can't go to the cops without it falling back on you. So are you going to go back to what Dean's original plan was and kind of murder him? But it's like, well, that didn't work out. That didn't stick the first time. And let's not forget, he already got his payback against Turner for putting him in that position and everything. So that could easily be their families too. Hell, that's even why Beth didn't want to tell anyone, because she didn't want to take the chance this would fall on Ruby or Annie either. But they're kind of in this together. But either way, like I said, it's going to be interesting to see where the next episode takes us with all of this. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.